1. I lived in a house share for a few years because of the cheap rent. Unfortunately, a new landlord bought the house. I used to have 3 people living in a house with 6 rooms. The landlord wanted to fill the rooms up, however, so he contacted the local council, who had someone in desperate need. The house had a tiny room that was literally called the box room on mail and had cheaper rent as a result. So this guy, D, for dickhead, moved in. Literally within 1 day of moving in, he'd stolen my hand towel out of the shared bathroom, so I politely asked for it back in the house group chat because I was so utterly perplexed. Then a day later, I noticed some aramusses missing from the fridge. I bought a few reduced, so I initially just put it down to miscounting. Then a few days later, I had gotten 2 18-inch pizzas from Costco. I had one in a day and left the other in the fridge to reheat for dinner throughout the week. D stole the entire pizza in one go. He managed to eat a 10-pound pizza in one sitting. I knew it was him, but I couldn't prove it. Out of 6 housemates, 1 housemate hadn't moved in yet, 1 hadn't yet used the kitchen, and the other 2 I'd lived with for a year with no problems. So I called out the anonymous thief out in the group chat, and it turned out he'd been stealing from the other 2 original housemates. I was thinking maybe it could have been his friends he kept inviting round, but no one could be that blatant, surely. At least he'd returned my hand towel to the bathroom, which I promptly washed 3 times. After 2 more days, I was sat on the stairs waiting for an Amazon delivery. I went to the bathroom and continued waiting. Whilst I was waiting, I heard Dee's door open and go to the bathroom. After getting my parcel, I walked into the bathroom to find my hand towel soaking and smelling of B.O. He'd wiped his dick on my hand towel. After a few days of him literally just living off of our food, we made a group chat so we could confirm it was him. One of the OG 2 housemates literally caught him red-handed stealing food from my cupboard the same evening, like literally opening it with food in his hands. So at that point we knew for sure it was him, but couldn't outright prove it. We contacted the landlord, who turned out was on holiday for a couple of weeks, so couldn't do anything about it. The landlord told us he couldn't do anything about it once he got back from holiday, so Dee just kept stealing food. He was getting cocky and started stealing more stuff from around the house, namely expensive face wipes from the bathroom cupboard, which I needed for sensitive skin. He only came out at night, because he was, messy, unemployed doing an occasional night shift, doing building work every couple of weeks, to get the council off his back. I knew this because he'd gotten a taxi back from his work and told the driver that whoever opened the door would pay for it. He never answered the door to the house. I had to literally get coded padlocks for the fridge and all the cupboards. I gave the codes to every other housemate. Whilst all of this was going on, he started angrily contacting us, telling us to stop calling him a thief in the group chat. We'd never said his name. The entire time, he'd been literally smoking marijuana in his room, causing the entire house to be flooded with smoke multiple times a day, and inviting many different dodgy blokes around the house. He was clearly dealing. With his profits from dealing, stealing, and his occasional night shifts, he bought a moped and a 55-inch television. He just left the box outside without even breaking it down. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, literally this one time, because I thought, there's no way in hell he'd be stupid enough to have such a big TV in a tiny room. One of the OG housemates demanded whoever the box belonged to break it down. Of course, Dee proudly admitted to it because he didn't think there would be consequences. I sent a link showing the fines we could get in the group chat. I told him thanks for admitting it. He got angry about that, and said he has a receipt for the TV in case I wanted to accuse him of stealing it. I replied with, at least you got a receipt for something, you own, eh? At that point, he lost it and started threatening me, in a group chat with our landlord in it. The landlord still couldn't do anything about it as long as Dee was paying rent, so us, the OG 3 housemates, demanded a meeting where the landlord revealed that Dee hadn't paid any rent. He'd just been pocketing the money that the council had sent him for rent. Dee got bored and spent hours brute forcing every combination in the lock to get into the cupboards one night. At this point, every housemate had to take all of our stuff out of the kitchen and the bathroom. We all had to get mini fridges to store our stuff in. Dee had even been stealing cutlery and plates. We genuinely couldn't figure out how he was fitting it all in his room. It was so ridiculous that we were starting to question each other because he was stealing so much that we were starting to doubt it could just be him. It genuinely was just him. One housemate stole a carton of eggs off Dee as a revenge, at which point Dee lost it and threatened to bin everything in the kitchen, like the air fryer and everything else that wasn't pinned down. I myself made some laxative brownies and left it out. He stole the entire box and spent 6 hours in coronation on the porcelain throne. That still didn't stop him from stealing stuff we'd occasionally forget to take out of the kitchen. Dee also never cleaned up after himself in the bathroom. He peed all over the floor and toilet seat every time he went in. I had my girlfriend at the time visit for a week, and literally every single time she used the bathroom, Dee tried to get in. Thank God she locked it. He was literally sat in his room, waiting to try to walk in on her in the bathroom. He waited outside for her at one point, and leered at her rear as she walked away. That's what finally made me lose it. I got the other OG housemates together, and we were planning on moving out, when Dee got a letter from the landlord threatening to evict him. One of the new housemates finally lost it as well, and threatened at 2 a.m. to kick his door in and to beat him. It turned out that Dee owed money to a lot of people. £120 to said housemate. I was laying in bed, smiling to myself as I could hear Dee panicking and promising to get the money to him. The other housemate was getting more and more angry. Dee started calling the police. But the other housemate shouted through his door that he knew about Dee's convictions and the police wouldn't do anything for him. I didn't know about said convictions, but it turned out that literally Googling his full name showed 2 arrests made within a year of each other. The landlord hadn't even Google searched this guy. One arrest was causing £2,000 worth of damage to a hotel room, and the other was for weed dealing. He turned up to court with tracksuit bottoms on, faked learning difficulties, and pulled the "but I have a kid" card. So the gullible judge had let him off because Dee was getting his act together. Some woman had genuinely given birth to this scumbag's child. Lo and behold, a year later, a giant angry man was at his door demanding money off of him, and for him to stop stealing from the housemates. Sure enough, his door got kicked down the very next day by 2 particularly irate customers of his, who he'd scammed. Presumably, our other roommate he owed the money to let him in. Dee wasn't in at the time. Dee's room was filled with moldy food and stolen cutlery. Essentially, months of stolen stuff that he denied stealing, all while angrily threatening us for calling him out in our group chat. He had also been stealing entire tubs of my expensive face wipes, not just using one, stealing entire tubs of 50. To rub it in, he'd even been taking chunks just to waste more. Once Dee got back from a hard day of being a stain on society, he realized what had happened and immediately fled to stay at a friend's house. The landlord questioned the housemates to see if anyone had seen anything, but we wouldn't have said anything if we had. We all despised Dee. The landlord put a notice of abandonment on Dee's possessions and forced him to sign a document saying that he was no longer living there. That was in return for him not having to pay for the fire door and 4 months' worth of rent, about £2,000 in total. Ironically, the same amount Dee had to pay that previously mentioned hotel in damages. Dee claimed he had no money, so the landlord gave him that deal. Then, a week later, Dee demanded access to his possessions. The landlord escorted him into the house, and I kid you not, one of the housemates overheard Dee telling the landlord that he needed access to his room to get his passport because he was going to South Africa, and he'd been to Tenerife a few weeks earlier as well. He essentially used the money he'd been given by the council for rent to buy a moped, a flat-screen TV, weed, and crack to smoke and sell, a week in Tenerife, a holiday in South Africa, takeaway pizzas every other day. Bear in mind, I was working a nearly minimum wage job with a 2-hour commute. NHS, gotta love it. And this piece of crap was stealing hundreds of pounds worth of food and bathroom supplies from the housemates. The cleaning lady found bags of crack underneath his bed. He'd been inviting literal crackheads into the house and selling it to them. It's a bloody miracle I didn't get murdered. He ended up fleeing the country, and had 24 letters sent to him from the council before he finally got what looked like an arrest warrant. To this day, I don't know what happened to him, but I strongly hope it's jail. 2. I'm a 21-year-old woman. Recently moved into my first apartment with a random roommate, who we will call Claire. Also 21 and female. Initially, things started off okay, and I tried to make a good impression on Claire by keeping the apartment clean, inviting her to hang out, offering her food that I made, etc. But things quickly took a downward spiral. Around a week after Claire moved in, I noticed dishes being left in the drying rack or being put back in the cabinets with old food still on them. We have a dishwasher, and this really didn't bother me at first, so I just started putting the dirty dishes she would leave in the dishwasher. As time went on, I started noticing things that were just slightly off. My towel being tampered with was the first thing I noticed. I am a very detail-oriented person, so when something I've put somewhere has been tampered with, I'll notice if it wasn't put back exactly how I left it. I try to give the benefit of the doubt because it should be common sense that using your roommate's bath towel is a big no-no just in general. However, my worst fears came to fruition. After spending the night at a friend's apartment, I arrived home to find that once again, my towel had been tampered with, and this time it smelled different than my towel should smell. I came to the realization that she had in fact been using my towel. Some other important issues include her shattering a bottle of olive oil on the floor and refusing to clean it up. I was not aware of this, and when I stepped out to get some water in the middle of the night, I stepped on a piece of glass while barefoot. I expected her to clean it up the next morning, but it was left there for a full week before she had her mother come into our apartment to clean it up. A conversation I overheard while her mother was over was Claire saying that she doesn't need to clean up after herself because she knows I'll do it eventually. I was angered and upset by this, and it led to me confronting her over text a few days later. I know it's better to talk about these things in person, but I did not feel safe bringing up any issues with her in person because, from my experience, she exhibits violent tendencies. She frequently yells profanities, throws objects, punches walls, and slams doors when frustrated, so I didn't know how she would react to criticism. I left the apartment altogether and locked the door to my room before the confrontation, and what I got back was a list of excuses essentially claiming that because she has ADHD, she is incapable of cleaning up after herself. I told her that while I sympathize with her, she still needs to maintain a certain level of cleanliness in common areas. This started a period of her completely ignoring my existence. She refused to speak to me or acknowledge my presence in any way, shape, or form. She started cleaning up a little better for about a week, but after that, things got worse. During the initial confrontation, I told her explicitly to stop using my towel, which she did, thank God. But a week after, I noticed that she was using my bar of soap in the shower. I promptly removed the bar soap, and she got angry, and began throwing my things on the floor every time she went to the bathroom. One day, while I was in the bathroom, I noticed something on the light switch, which I quickly identified to be poop. This was a breaking point for me, and I emailed the building management about the health and safety standards that I believed Claire possessed, but they were of little help. I used to do a deep clean of the apartment every weekend, but with midterm season and stress from life in general, I missed a few weeks of this cleaning. During this time, I was spending a lot of time on campus, so I wasn't using the kitchen at the apartment at all. Claire was. Dishes built up over the 3 weeks that I wasn't cleaning up after her, and rotting food was left in the sink. It was really quite disgusting, and I was just waiting around to see if she would ever clean it. Spoiler alert, she didn't. And this brings me to the incident of this past weekend. I was having 2 friends over at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. I didn't tell her because all we were doing was hanging out and chatting in the living room, and she rarely leaves her room. Also, she was not done ignoring my existence, so I assumed everything would be fine. Everything was fine, and my friends left at around 6. I went out with some other friends later that night and received a text from Claire at around 10 p.m. telling me that I had been incredibly disrespectful for having people over and that I had ruined her plans for the day. For reference, my friends and I sat on the couch and talked. We weren't preventing her from doing anything in the apartment. I sent her back a text saying that my friends were over to comfort me as I was recovering from a medical procedure that I had on Friday. I will admit that I was a little petty and asked her to clean up after herself more often because I had to clean her 3 weeks of dirty, rotting dishes to make the apartment presentable. But quite frankly, I don't think that's a very big ask. She left the message on read and is back to not speaking to me. Today, however, I was leaving the apartment to get food from the market across the street, and as I was exiting the elevator, she was entering the elevator. She saw me, and as she passed by, aggressively shoved me out of the way. For reference, I am not a large person in any regard, never even reaching 5 feet. She is about a foot taller than me, so you can imagine what happened when she shoved me. I told a friend about what happened, and she says that it would be considered assault. I am now feeling unsafe in my living situation, and I don't know what to do next. I have started looking for new places to move to, but breaking my lease would be really expensive. 3. So I am a 30-year-old woman, and I moved in at the start of this month with 3 roommates, 36 male, 33 male, 27 male. It wasn't my optimal choice for a living situation, but it was almost the end of the month, and having viewed place after place unsuccessfully for them to choose someone else, and having 2 places that had initially agreed to move me in have something come up and change last minute, I decided to take it. When I'd come by to view the place a handful of times, the place was furnished, albeit sparsely, and was clean. Then I signed my lease and moved in. Nearly immediately after, the place started to get really messy and dirty, and the sofa vanished from the living room into the roommate who owned its bedroom. Our living room currently has 0 furniture, and I seem to be the only one who cares about sourcing and fixing that problem, but alas, that's a secondary problem. On the day I moved in, when I was going to put my dishes and such away in the kitchen, I noticed that there was 0 organization to it. No utensil tray, with utensils randomly spread amongst drawers, minimal dishes, which were seemingly just kept in the sink when dirty, and the dishwasher when clean. And everyone's food was mixed through all the cupboards, which also had spread through them all the pots, pans, cooking utensils, etc. Last weekend, the kitchen had reached a peak point of disgusting, with the sink full of rotting food. So I set it to myself a project. Over the course of 12 hours, I completely deep-cleaned, scrubbing down every inch of the kitchen inside and out, the worst part of which was cleaning out the sink, which was filled with rotting food, emptied all the cupboards, the drawers, scrubbed those out too, and reorganized the whole kitchen, separating the cupboards by person and purpose, and labeling all the cupboards and drawers to make it easy on everyone. I also spent about $70 of my own money on things like utensils, dishes, cleaning products, organizational things like drawer dividers, cupboard organizers, spice racks, etc. It took me until 4:30 in the morning, but I finally finished, and basked in my clean, organized kitchen. Then, when I went to sleep, got up, went to work, and went to a friend's place for the night. By the time I got home the next day, the kitchen was a disaster again. The dishwasher, instead of being emptied of its clean dishes and then being put away, just had clean dishes taken from it as needed. The dirty dishes were building up in the sink, still covered in food. The drain catcher was already filled with food, the counters covered in spices and oil. It took me about 45 minutes to get everything clean again. So I politely sent a message to all my roommates begging them to please help keep the kitchen clean, by simply emptying the dishwasher if they see it's full of dishes, and after they use a dish, to scrape the food off into the compost bin. I had purchased and conveniently affixed to the cupboard door under the sink, rinsing off their dish in the sink and placing it in the dishwasher, starting the dishwasher if it was full and wiping down the countertops with the paper towel I had provided. This lasted maybe about 3 days, then they were back to old habits, with me spending about half an hour each night cleaning everyone's mess from the kitchen, which I personally barely use as I mostly eat takeout and cereal. The bathroom is also a problem. Twice in the past month, someone has used a paper towel instead of toilet paper while taking a crap, clogged the toilet severely, and just left it that way. I have one roommate who's quite clean, who's got his own ensuite bathroom, which is always spotless, who has started to allow me to use his bathroom, but it still smells the house up, so I ended up being the one who deals with it. When I've discussed the kitchen with him, he said he'd been trying to teach both his past roommates and the one who still lived with them before I moved in, myself and one of my roommates moved in on the same month, how to keep the kitchen proper for forever. But it never worked, so he just gave up and started to use a mini-fridge and hot plate in his bedroom. Is there any way to actually get the two disgusting roommates to take responsibility for their behavior and start respecting their home at all? Or am I just doomed to living in filth every time I leave my bedroom until I either A, move out, or B, give up like my fellow roommate and start doing everything in my room, which sadly doesn't have its own bathroom? I understand that living with single men, you're often going to deal with a certain level of mess, but this was far beyond my expectations. 4. Background. I have lived at my place for over 5 years, and have fully furnished the home as well as bought several amenities, espresso maker, ice machine, extra fridge, freezer, etc., for myself that I have happily shared with previous housemates because I want them to be comfortable. I currently have 2 roommates, one that I have lived with for over a year and have no issues. The other is halfway through a 5.5-month standard lease and is driving me crazy. She is temporarily in the States for graduate school but is from another country. I found out after she moved in that she has no money and is on an extremely tight budget and can't get a job. I've tried to be super accommodating of her because I felt bad, but she's taken advantage of it and I'm at breaking point. The issue, short version, I might go into more details later, she has essentially helped herself to whatever she wants in the house and took things from other rooms to furnish her bedroom, and only asked if it was okay after the fact. I'm a pushover and have a hard time saying no after the fact. To keep it short, she has essentially acted as though her lease entitles her to use whatever she wants that is inside the house however she wants whenever she wants. I really didn't mind if she borrowed stuff as long as she treated it with the same level of care I treat my stuff with, returned it in the same condition she found it, and didn't use it in any way that prevented me from using it. She has caused nearly £2,000 in damages to the house and my stuff already. She doesn't clean up after herself and leaves gross food messes all over the house, and is regularly damaging my stuff, not putting it away properly, creating more work for me, or keeping me from using it. I've tried addressing the issues with her 2 times in person now, once unscheduled and she interrupted me and talked over me, and once in a scheduled roommate meeting with my other roommate. Both myself and the other roommate have sent several texts addressing issues as well. Nothing has changed. The last straw was when she returned a mattress she borrowed to the guest room. I noticed she didn't even put the mattress back on the bed frame. I sent her a text and asked her to remake the bed properly. When she initially took the mattress without asking, I said she could sleep in the guest room until she got a mattress, not take it to her room. She left the clean sheets and bedding crumpled in a ball on the floor. I washed the now dirty bedding and folded it and left it on the bed frame. She asked me how to make the bed. I said how you found it. She said that was 3 months ago and she doesn't remember. I said use the sheets and comforter that are on the bed frame and just make the bed properly. She put the fitted sheet on the bed and then left everything else on it. Didn't even put the pillowcase on. I thought maybe she didn't know how to make a bed, but I check her room and her bed is made properly. I really don't know if it's laziness, stupidity, weaponized incompetence, or something else, but I'm fed up. I'm at the point where I feel like she has lost the privilege to use my property. I just want to tell her if it's not something that is included in a standard lease, furniture in shared spaces or cleaning supplies, and I purchased it, she can't use it. The problem is that would put her in a really crummy spot. The only thing she owns in the house, other than what is in her room, is 8 plates, 4 bowls, and some spoons. There's only 2-ish months left, and she supposedly has no money to purchase anything. And I would feel bad, but I can't mentally or financially afford to allow her to keep using my things. Based on my previous post, I decided that I would give her one more strike, and then I would address the issues as I didn't want to without a recent incident, and have it feel like it was coming out of nowhere. Things were fine and quiet for a while, and I was super busy, so didn't really interact with her much. She sent me a text beginning of November telling me she booked her flight for mid-January and would be extending her lease until then. I told her I had scheduled renovation plans and would not be able to extend the lease. In her defense, when she signed the lease, she asked if extending the lease would be an option, if she decided she wanted to stay longer. I said that we could look into it, if it was a good fit, but did not promise anything and said it would need to be another conversation well in advance. I still have no idea why the hell she would book the flight before confirming where she was staying. She did not talk to me for a few days after that, but my other roommate said she was angrily slamming around the kitchen that night and complaining about how she didn't know about the renovation plans. About a week and a half later, she sent another text message stating that she was having a hard time finding a place to stay for 2 weeks and couldn't stay with family. She said she found a place but needed to rent it out for more than a month and couldn't afford double rent. She said that based on the lease agreement, she would be ending her lease early and was giving me her 30-day notice. She commented on the vibes being off and wanted to make her remaining time in the home positive. I told her I was sorry she was having a hard time finding a place, that I had scheduled the renovations beginning of October, after she had a conversation with me that she was probably going to move out before Christmas, so she could travel in California with her friend with benefits before she went back home. I informed her that early termination clause in the lease required her to find a subletter for the remainder of her lease. Then I included, "As a roommate, I felt like you've taken advantage of my generosity. You've acted as though you're entitled to many things that aren't included in the lease. I was happy to accommodate you because I knew you were in a tough situation and wanted to help you feel comfortable, but you've consistently damaged or treated my things poorly, or left extra work for me by not returning them in the same condition you found them. At this point, I'm honestly over it, and I haven't brought it up because I didn't want to cause an issue," to address her comments about bad vibes. She responded by complaining that she can't find a subletter since it's such short notice and a short period of time. She complained that she didn't know about the renovations and was upset that I hadn't communicated about them with her, repeatedly told me that paying double rent would be really hard for her, and asked to find an agreement in the middle. She then apologized for making me feel that way and went into detail and rambled about her logic regarding the 3 most recent issues that had been brought up at that point in time, and stated that usually roommates share. I said, "Thanks for your apology. I want to clarify that I don't have an issue with sharing. All my past roommates' arrangements have involved sharing, but in those cases, everyone contributed something, or if they couldn't, they helped more with general cleaning to make up for it. Plus, they were careful with the items they used, made sure others could still access them, and returned them in the same condition they found them. They were so appreciative, which went a long way. In this case, you haven't really provided anything to share or have demonstrated patterns of not handling my things with care, and a general lack of consideration of our other roommate and me. It's not just the few things you mentioned, though I don't think going into a list would be beneficial. I don't need you to replace anything. Since you asked, I just wanted to be open with you about why it's been frustrating." Ultimately, in regard to the lease, I told her I could possibly give her a portion of the lease back, based on utilities at the end of the month. She again complained and said she felt stuck, and asked me to take her situation into consideration. I found this entertaining, as she really had no concept of being considerate. From that point on, I would say hi to her when I saw her, but did not actively try to engage with her. 3 days after that, she took my wet laundry out of the washing machine again and put it in the laundry basket on the floor. It's a dollar store laundry basket, so there's basically no bottom, so my wet laundry was essentially sitting on the carpet overnight. I had already addressed that this was not acceptable when she did it the first time, and my clothes ended up in the litter box. I 100% believe this was completely intentional and malicious. I was in my bedroom, next to the laundry room, with the door open. If she did not want to move them herself, she could have just asked me. Also, these were damn towels, so she doesn't have the excuse of I didn't know if they could go in the dryer or not. I didn't realize until the following morning, and had to rewash my laundry. I was ready to go off on her, but did not want to do it when I was home alone with her, so it did not end up happening as too much time had passed before we weren't home alone, and she left the house. Another 3 days later, She left coffee, spilled on the counter again, this time stained. Again, I was ready to send a message to her, but after talking to wiser adults than myself and realizing she was really only going to be in the house like 4 more days outside of traveling for Thanksgiving, I decided it was not worth it. It's not my job to teach her to be a decent person. She moved out yesterday while I was at work, but my boyfriend was at my house as a safeguard. She sent me a text today asking me to send December's rent and deposit back so she could pay for her new place. I had told her I'd get her deposit to her within the legal time frame, and reminded her I said the portion of December's rent would be based on utilities, and I wouldn't know that until January like I already told her. In the process of moving out, I know she took 2, possibly 3 of my pillows, and possibly more things I have yet to discover. She also took my other roommate's comforter, and then asked if she was happy to get rid of it, when she supposedly realized she took it. I'm honestly insanely relieved. It feels like a huge weight off my shoulders. I'm really proud of standing my ground in regard to the lease extension and payment, and while I think it would have been really enjoyable to send those messages, I'm glad I didn't waste my breath. It's not my job, and she wasn't going to learn anything from them. The only thing it would do is just reinforce her idea that I just didn't want to share. 5. Buckle up and get ready for a long, wild ride. This all happened almost 20 years ago, so the timeline might be a little off. Her name was Mara. Not her real name, but close enough. It's tattooed on the back of her neck, so the random guy she sleeps with will remember it. Her words, not mine. Well, I guess we know what kind of position she likes. We both lived in the same province and moved to the other side of the country to work at a tourist destination one summer right out of high school. There was a group of 6 or 7 of us, all young women who lived and worked together. It was a strange dynamic. We all got along well with each other, though. We would go out and party together, have dinners, etc. The camaraderie only lasted the first few weeks until Mara, who shared a room with me, started borrowing my clothes and makeup without asking. I asked her to stop. She didn't. I told her off, and she kept doing it. When another room opened, Betty, the other girl we shared a room with, and I decided to take it and left Mara on her own. Betty didn't like her very much either, so we figured we would be civil and let her do her own thing. Mara started going off and partying on her own with who knows else. She would stay out until 3 or 4 a.m. during the week, even later on the days off, and would wake the entire house up fumbling around drunk in the dark. There were multiple occasions where I would wake up for my shift, go to make some breakfast, and the stove burners were still turned on from her late-night escapades. Or the door wide open. We lived in a national park, so any kind of animal could have just strolled on in and made itself at home. There was always a mess someone else would end up cleaning. Our other co-workers and roommates were split. Some liked her, the rest of us tolerated her, or felt sorry for her because she would tell us sad stories about her mother taking her baby from her and how awful her family was back home. At work, things were good. Like I said before, we worked in a national park at a restaurant and gift shop, and 90% of the time it was packed. She worked the restaurant side, me the gift shop, so thankfully our paths didn't cross very often. Our manager, Natalie, loved Mara. The owner, Nat's father, on the other hand, did not. He did, however, love me, and would pull me into the restaurant when it was slow and entertain me with stories. That leads down a whole other rabbit hole. As time went on, I was given more responsibility, doing inventory and whatnot. I had to go through the kitchen to get into the upstairs storage area. As I was walking back to the gift shop with an armful of stuff, she walked by me, we bumped shoulders, and we both just kept walking. She didn't apologize. I didn't either, and just went on about my day thinking nothing of it. A little while later I went out for a smoke break. She followed me out and started screaming about how I was an awful rude bitch and pushing her around on purpose. I just stared at her, laughed, and told her to get the hell out of my face while we were at work. She stormed off. When we got home, she confronted me again, stuck her foot in my door and refused to leave. I told her I was sorry we bumped into each other, but get the hell over it. I never got an apology from her, and I wasn't being salty about it. She finally left, and I thought that was it. Nope. She went crying to her manager, who called a house meeting, while Mara cried about how horrible I was for not sharing my things with her, even though I apparently told her she could use my stuff whenever she felt like it. I hate germs, so I would never say this to a stranger, especially with makeup. She cried about how I didn't want to be her friend, and she laid it on thick. All I could do was sit there and stare at her in anger and disbelief. Then she cried about how I had such a cold gaze, and she was scared of me. Like what? When it was my turn to speak, I told her we were never going to be friends, but I'm happy to stay civil and work out the rest of my contract in peace. I think we had about a month to go. My manager couldn't wrap her head around the fact that I didn't want to be friends with this girl, and my relationship with her wasn't the same after that. Now, this is when it hit the fan. If you made it this far, I appreciate the heck out of you. So at this point, Mara's ex-boyfriend came back into the picture, and she would sneak him into the house. We weren't allowed to have overnight guests, and the manager lived right above us with her brother. One morning, way before dawn, we were woken up by the sound of smashing glass. We were arguing, and this jackass was throwing rocks through our windows. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but we had to call the cops and board up the windows. We were fed up, so as a group we decided she needed to clean up all the broken glass everywhere. We would have helped, but the lion's share was her responsibility. You think this girl lifted a finger? Nope. A week later, there was still glass everywhere. Talking to her got us nowhere. My manager did nothing. We were forced to clean up the glass or keep stepping on it, or it getting into our clothes and food. After this debacle, you would have thought that she would have been fired, right? Sadly, we were all wrong, and what happened next was quite tragic. Things were quiet for about a week. Mara stayed close to home and didn't go out as much, so we were all surprised one morning when we woke up and she was gone. This is mostly second-hand information from now on. The girl rooming with her said she was woken up by Mara's phone ringing just before 6 a.m. She packed up a few things and snuck out. I believe this girl asked if everything was all right, and her question was just brushed off. Mara missed work. Her phone was off. The police were even called for a welfare check on the second day she missed work and hadn't come home. Even I was starting to get worried at this point. A week went by, and her roomie got a frantic call from her, yelling about how she needed help. She didn't know where she was, and the phone cut off. Roomie called the police right away. You tracked her cell to the middle of the forest, people. In a national damn park. There's bears, cougars, moose, all kinds of things ready to mess you up in there. They eventually found her alone at a motel in the next town over, about 3 hours from where we lived. Her nose was broken, she said she'd been assaulted, and they found needles and drugs in her possession. She was in the hospital for a few days and then shipped off back home. I don't know why, but my manager asked me to pack up Mara's things for her while she was in the hospital, so Betty and I did. As we were packing, a note fell out of one of her books, and it was a letter from her mom, basically saying how disappointed she was in Mara, how her drug addiction ruined a lot of lives, and she wished one day she could be healthy enough to raise her own child. It was some really heartbreaking stuff. We packed it back up and sent it off with my manager to bring to Mara, and that was that. I do hope she got the help she finally needed, is happily raising her daughter and teaching her not to leave the stove on. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Bad Roommates 45. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Oh, and do support me on my Patreon page, that really does help. That's linked in the description. Okay, I don't think we have any other business. I don't... No, I don't think there's any shoutouts this week so far. Alright, just to say, if you do want a birthday shoutout, do try to get it in, say, about a week and a half, minimum to 2 weeks ahead of time. Longer is great. It's just to make sure that you actually get it in on the day that you want it. Otherwise, I can still do them, it just won't be on the actual day. That goes for all shoutouts, not just birthdays. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Has a delivery service ever pleasantly surprised you? I ask this because I needed some new footwear for my feet. Because I do a lot of walking around. I tend to wear through shoes and sneakers and things pretty regularly. The holes are always at the same spot, but I guess just because of the way I walk. So I needed a new pair of Vans, and I got a really good deal during the Black Friday sale on them. In fact, they're actually still about the same price right now. I'm considering getting another pair, but we'll see. So I'd got them, and I thought, it's going to be over a month until they deliver them, which for Amazon's a really long time. I'm used to maybe a couple of days at most. In most cases, usually next day, because, I pay for that sweet Prime. But it was going to be middle of January. And I thought, you know what, it's a really good deal, and I am Scottish, and we do love a bargain. So I went for the good deal. Plus, I like Vans. I find them quite comfortable on my feet. And I then began the waiting. It's going to be a long wait, but I'm going to wait. But no, they're already here, and that was only about a week ago. So I got a dispatch notice yesterday saying, okay, they've been dispatched. They'll be here on Tuesday. And here we are on Sunday, and they're already here. The guy came at about 8 p.m. I said, thank you very much. And then I took them, and then I closed the door and said goodbye, as is my way. So that's mine. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from BadRoommates43 and comes from one of my moderators, Kathy Beckford. And this was about items where you really don't care about the name brand. You just care about the quality of the item, and the store brand is often as good, if not better in some cases. Sometimes the store brand is better. And Kathy's answer is, I'm finding that the store brand, Bowl & Basket, at my grocery store is just as good or even better than the name brands. Thank you very much for your answer, Kathy. And I also find, like in cases of Lidl and Aldi, they have their own, what I call, not just me, I didn't invent it, what are called knockoff brands. The packages are very similar, in some cases very, very similar to the name brands, with the layout, the kinds of colors used, sometimes even with the names, and they're done to kind of evoke and to draw your attention, not assuming that you'll be stupid enough to think it is the name brand, but just for that sense of familiarity to get you to pay attention to it. And I often find that the quality of those is really good. This isn't going to be an amazing example because the original one isn't great anyway, but it's a cup noodle, right? Made by Golden Wonder, and the knockoff version that Aldi sells are quite frankly better tasting than the originals, because the originals have changed the recipe over the years so much that they're really not as flavorful as they used to be. But the Aldi one actually is. And it's a very cheap but satisfying kind of quick meal. You boil a kettle, you just pour it in, you let it cook, and then boom, noodles. And so I would generally prefer to buy the Aldi ones over the Golden Wonder ones. And no, I'm not throwing no shade at Golden Wonder. They make many wonderful things, but some things they used to make better than they currently do. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.